Hello everyone. I thought I'd do a video about an article I'm thinking about writing. I don't know if I'll turn it into an article because it's based on someone else's article from last year. But I want to take a quick look at it and show one of the things that I've got on Google Sheets for everyone to use and how I use it. Um, so running backs. Efficiency metrics for running backs suck. Now, as I've said before, I care more about volume than efficiency, most of the time at least, because opportunity is still king in the NFL. Um, what I've got right here is different efficiency metrics. The O-line's not really efficiency, but it'll do. And yards per carry, which is basically the only running back efficiency metric, and it's sucky. It's not good pretty much for anything um, at all. Whereas if we compare O-line, for example, and yards per carry, both come in at 1% and 6% correlation to fantasy points. Volume, on the other hand, comes in, and volume in this sense is both rushing attempts and targets, so not receptions, so it's not touches, so I'm just calling it volume. Every opportunity they got correlates to fantasy points at 91%. So 91% of fantasy points are being explained by how much opportunity they're getting on the field. Rushing attempts alone counts at 84%, and that's PPR points too. So even in PPR leagues, 84% of fantasy points are being explained simply by the number of times a running back runs the ball in fantasy. Now, these numbers are from 2000 to 2017, and so they're all running backs for the last 17 years combined. Um, so that's a pretty big sample size. If we limit it just to the top 24 running backs, we see the same patterns at O-line and yards per carry. The best we get is 7% explanation of fantasy points for the top 24 running backs based on their yards per carry. It's junk in terms of predicting or explaining even, or even describing fantasy points. And the other thing with yards per carry is it's incredibly not sticky. This does not seem to be a product of the running back. It's the interplay of the running back, the offensive line, and everything else that goes on in any given running play. There's just too much that goes on when you try to run the ball to really pin yards per carry to the running back, and therefore it's not going to move in the running back if they move team or the situation improves, because this is attached to too many different things. At the same time, volume, so rushing attempts and targets, still explaining 55% of fantasy points, and 28% is explained simply by rushing attempts. So obviously, volume isn't everything, it's just the most useful thing for predicting who's going to do what. Who's going to get the ball the most, they're going to score the most points. Excuse me. All this data, by the way, and I'll obviously put it in the description there, the O-line ranks come from Fantasy Outsiders, but they're from FF Statistics, as is the targets and rushing attempts that I use, and the yards per carries, all from FF Statistics. Alright, if we're just... where was I? I just did that, didn't I? Yes. If we just limit it to 2017, we find pretty much the exact same patterns. So this is just 2017, and this is everyone from 2000 to 2017. So this is 17 years worth of data still, but only for top 24 running backs. If I limit it again just to 2017, just so you know there's nothing funky going on with the numbers, we find almost the exact same numbers. So year over year, efficiency's inability to predict fantasy points, and O-line ranks inefficiency to predict fantasy points is sticky, as is volume's ability to predict fantasy points. So it's further proof that's what we should really be paying attention to. Now, one thing that I think is interesting, I don't think we have a large enough sample yet at all, but it was brought up by playerprofiler.com, and they track evaded tackles. So tackles the running back has managed to evade, quite literally, recorded by their top-notch team of tape watchers, which is useful for us. They've been doing it since 2014, so that's why we don't have enough data yet, but it does seem to be a lot more effective of telling you what a running back is doing rather than the situation, because it focuses on their actual actions on a running play rather than running play's success as a whole. And also early numbers suggest, and this is from 2004, these are all the numbers from 2014 to 2017 for top 24 running backs, and it correlates to fantasy points at 37% click, which is a lot better than anything outside of pure volume, right? And that's why it's interesting. If I limit it again, this is the expanded view of all evaded tackles numbers. So this isn't just the top 24 running backs. This is everyone they've managed to record since 2014 versus their fantasy points. And that correlates to fantasy points at an 83% rate. So as an efficiency stat, it's definitely outscoring yards per carry by a very, 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 very large margin, and it's actually coming close to volume numbers. So if we could combine volume and this efficiency metric, even though this is new, and that's the thing about it, we don't have enough yet, but it's promising. If we combine the two, we might have something special, at least specialer, or a better way to go, definitely, than yards per carry. I think we need a new efficiency metric, and evaded tackles or something like it is going to be the way to go about it. Now, this is all said and said better by someone much smarter than me, and that's Joshua, I never heard him call that before, Joshua Hermsmeyer from ayards.com, the creator of ayards.com, as well as efficiency metrics like Bracer and Pacer, and you already know who he is. I'm going to shut up. But he wrote an article last year on Player Profiler, and he literally tested evaded tackles per game, and juke rate, and put all the numbers up here. So I was really into this, and I focused on his top 10 list, and he pointed out by ADP, like Eddie Lacy, C.J. Anderson, Jonathan Stewart. These are all buy lows based on their ADP and how well they've done in evaded tackles and evaded tackles per game. He also published what TJ Hernandez puts out. He didn't publish, he republished. And that's how well different running back efficiency metrics or stats, specifically volume stats as well, relate to fantasy points. So I'm not putting out anything new here. TJ Hernandez has been doing it a long time, and Joshua Hermsmeyer has been studying it and putting it out together with evaded tackles for a lot longer. But I thought I wanted to update it. That's how mostly I get into the subjects I do. I like this last year. How can I find that out for this year? And so I go on and do that. He also pointed out that evaded tackles, like I was just saying, correlates better to fantasy points and success more than pretty much any other efficiency metric, as per TJ Hernandez's index. And that's last year, but the same is true. Josh Hermsmeyer's big point here was that evaded tackles is also sticky. That's what this is telling us, that year over year, a player who evades tackles at a certain rate tends to evade them at that same rate the next year, certainly a lot more than they retain their yards per carry, for example, or yards per touch, or any other running back efficiency metric. So I wanted to go ahead and try and update this without ripping the idea off, and to do that I have to tell you exactly what he did, and also I'll link this article, because I am not coming up with this. This is Hermsmeyer's game, I'm just playing it. Alright, I'll get to that in a minute. Alright, so I went and looked at 2016, again using combining player profiler data right here, with FF statistics tracking of yearly statistics. And this is the same list Josh Hermsmeyer was looking at in that article here, this top 10 list. Where is it? Right here. Alright. So FF Statistics is definitely doing its job. Now, one thing that went wrong this last year and I think he mentioned it in the other ones, I can't remember, is that I was really big on Eddie Lacy, in part because I like this efficiency metric that Joshua Hermsmeyer pointed out, but also just because of the situation, and I expected volume. So from 2016's point of view, the only warning note here was, again, volume. And if we remember, my big thing, if we go back here, that volume is, we have a large enough sample size to believe in volume. We're just trying to marry it to something we don't quite understand as well, but does seem promising in evaded tackles. And so what I did, and it's been up for a while, it's probably going to be hopefully not a surprise to anyone, is I made a little Excel tool and I put it in a Google sheet so that anyone can use it, which means you can edit this document, you can write in here and stuff, but don't, right? Just change these two things, because every time someone types or breaks, I have to come back in and fix it, and it's actually quite a lot of work, but that's fine. Use it as much as you like, and again, I'll put this link in the description. Just delete stuff and I'll be fine. Alright, so what I've done here, as quickly as I can, is compile player profiler data and volume data, and try to find an average over and under at different volume levels. And what I've got here is a description of those volume levels, right? So every running back with 0 to 50 touches, every running back with 51 to 99 touches, and all these different levels, I averaged out how many evaded tackles from the small sample that we have since 2014, how many evaded tackles they had. And then what I did is put that together with the individual players by year, the average, and the sum. So in other words, when you put a player's name in here, like Devontae Freeman, who's really good at this metric, this side of the table over here tells you how far over or under he was the average based on the volume he got in that year. So in 2015 he had 337 touches. So as you can see down here, I also have over 300 touches averaged out. So of all running backs that had over 300 touches, he was actually slightly under the average. He had 3.7 fewer evaded tackles. But again, this metric's only just picking up speed, so I'm not too worried if you're close enough to 0, and especially after 2016 and 17, where he's been 7 to 6 evaded tackles over the average based on, again, high volume, 281 touches and 232 touches, that averages out to him being typically 11 evaded tackles better than the average running back, and 14 if you just add them all together, right, and divide. That's what the sum is. So Eddie Lacy, as I was just talking about on Hermsmeyer's list, looked really good after 2016, even based on his volume that was only 75 touches. In 2017, he dropped off a cliff, as we know. With the same touches, he was 13.5 evaded tackles under. The worry spot here was that he had only 75 touches. And we can also see that he was pretty far under the evaded tackles average, even further than most, in 2015 as well, and that's when he had significant volume. And the reason I got Freeman up here is to point out that this isn't infallible, right? I don't want to run into the same mistake I did last year and run into the Eddie Lacy brick wall, because Devontae Freeman was under the average in 2015 and then continued to be excellent like Eddie Lacy, but then he also managed to carry it over in 2017. He also managed to keep his volume though, whereas Eddie Lacy did not. So the situation and reading the players is important, so I wanted to point that out. Now, someone that stands out this year, if we look back at this table here, is evaded tackles per game, Chris Carson, right? And I've heard his name mentioned by a few people, like Evan Silver's mentioned him, so this isn't, again, I'm not pointing at someone you don't know of, and obviously the situation specifically has gotten worse for Chris Carson because the team drafted Rashad Penny, which is definitely going to eat into his role, and I predict his volume's going to remain low, and therefore he's not a great buy, but he's maybe a good buy behind Penny, and depending on what you think of CJ Process, I guess. So again, that's what this thing helps me out with. It lets me compare his evaded tackles, and then also be wary because he's only got 56 volume, 56 touch volume at the same time. And so I pointed that out in these notes here. Mostly, if they're 50 touches or even under 100 touches, you should just be wary. I ran the R squared on the volume levels as well. And mostly they're just something to ignore under 100 touches. Starts to get okay after 100 touches, but really you want as many as possible to get a clear picture as possible of what that running back is capable of. So what I've also done using DLF ADP is put in their May ADP and their positional ADP. This is their ADP, and this is their positional ADP. So I'm just, again, recreating this that Josh Herzmeyer put together for 2016. What we find is a similar pattern of very high quality running backs: Le'Veon Bell, Kareem Hunt, Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, and some with low volume. So unfortunately, I don't see any great buy lows, and even Dalvin Cook. Yeah, his volume isn't enough really for me to get too excited, and that kind of sums up my answer on Dalvin Cook for trade questions. He's probably good. Okay, he's probably good, but 4-game sample. He's got the draft capital and the college production, so I'm treating him like a rookie. Like, he's probably good, but we didn't get a large enough NFL sample to really know. However, I should have, I should have done this already, but this table's going to slide on me. If we go slightly below the top 10, what we also find are other promising players with volume, but significant evaded tackles per game, like Dion Lewis, Alex Collins. These aren't very cheap running backs. They're in the 20 to 25 positional ADP, but they're certainly a lot cheaper than the ones in the top column, and they are being efficient as measured by this better efficiency metric than yards per carry. Obviously, Devontae Freeman, like I've already shown you, is already still above average, and so I still think he's the most undervalued top 10 running back in the league right now. Now, these guys are all mostly gone, right? Adrian Peterson isn't on a team. Mike Davis was depth and, again, small volume. What I find interesting in this sub-tier here is that Frank Gore, yes, I don't know, the ever-living Frank Gore, but he did get significant volume, and he was actually pretty good at evaded tackles per game and in evaded tackles overall. I don't know how popular that's going to be as a buy low, but Frank Gore has this better efficiency metric on his side and actually did fairly well with it last year. So, terrible in 2016. Anyway, so that's how I'm using this tool to compare volume and then evaded tackles based on their volume, so that I can see both any warning flags and any positives over the as large a sample as we have, which is 3 years. And then I've averaged it and summed it just to try and get as clear a picture as possible. I also put this all in a table because some people are asking, like, you don't like to do it 2 players at a time, I just want to look down the list. And so here it is. In the second tab here called Full Table, I've got all the evaded tackles. Now these are the evaded tackles over and under the average. If you want to get the full evaded tackles data, the evaded tackles per game, or juke rate, which is another thing that Joshua Hansmeier looked at in this article, then you have to go to playerprofiler.com. They've got a lot of the data on the player pages, but also you can sign up for their full package and get full access to their data analysis tab. I can't put that data on here for you all to see because it's kind of proprietary. People are charting it. They are working hard to collect that data, and you have to pay to get access to it. So this is just my numbers. So they are a lot more fallible than Player Profiler's numbers. If you want to see this is what I've done with the numbers. And so I feel kind of okay putting that out there. But if you want the actual numbers, the actual data from Player Profiler, you have to go to Player Profiler, either sign up for the thing, or I think they've got a lot of it on their player pages. You just can't do data analysis on it and download the table to do it full scale, but they probably have. yeah, a lot of efficiency metrics down here on individual player pages. So you can find it that way if you're interested in a specific player or expanding on what my table or load comparison tool can do. All right, well, I hope that was somewhat useful or interesting. Thanks for checking it out. I'll talk to you.